Learning water breathing from Urokodaki was the perfect platform for Tanjiro to develop sun breathing, as it gave him the fundamental skills of swordsmanship and taught him to use his sense of smell. But what if Tanjiro started out with a different breathing style, something rarer and more mysterious? In today's video, we'll explore what would happen if Tanjiro was a moon breathing user. This isn't just about swapping one breathing style for another, because moon breathing's existence would change the entire trajectory of the story, and I'm going to show you exactly how. We'll be exploring 3 different timelines based on the assumptions we make along the way, and each version will lead to a drastically different outcome. The first problem we need to solve before beginning our story is how Tanjiro ends up learning moon breathing. We could have him be a student of Kokushibo himself, but that would make this timeline even crazier. So in our alternate reality, moon breathing just isn't lost to history. Michikatsu takes on some disciples during the Sengoku era, and even after he became Kokushibo and betrayed the Demon Slayer Corps, some of his students survived and preserved the technique. These disciples passed moon breathing down through the generations, letting it become a core breathing style just like wind, flame, water, thunder, and stone. This leads us to a timeline where Urokodaki Sakonji is the leading teacher of moon breathing, and his leading student, Muichiro Tokito, is the moon Hashira of the Taisho era. However, Giyu is still the water Hashira, and he's the one who finds Tanjiro and Nezuko after the Kamado family is attacked by demons. But instead of sending Tanjiro to learn water breathing, Giyu recognizes that Tanjiro's keen sense of smell is similar to Urokodaki's, and decides the former moon Hashira would be a better master for the boy. Tanjiro arrives at Mount Sagiri, and even though he has no formal training, the old master sees potential in his unshakable resolve to save his sister. Moon breathing is known for its elegant crescent-shaped slashes and unpredictable attack patterns, combining both offense and defense seamlessly. It's more difficult to learn than water breathing, but is more powerful and dangerous. Our first timeline follows Tanjiro as a pure moon breathing user who never discovers his family's connection to sun breathing. Tanjiro's journey starts strong, and this is exactly why he never connects swordsmanship to the Hinokami Kagura. His moon breathing is more than adequate for the lower ranked demons, and even the battle against Kyogai in the Tsuzumi mansion goes pretty smoothly. Tanjiro first awakened the Hinokami Kagura during his battle against Rui, the lower Moon 5, when he couldn't find a way to cut through the demon's webs. But in this timeline, when Tanjiro is completely surrounded, he uses the moon-breathing fifth form, Moon Spirit Calamitous Eddy, to obliterate Rui's trap. However, the battle isn't easy, and Tanjiro is on the back foot for the entire fight, even with Nezuko's newly awakened blood demon art. When Giyu arrives to finish the job, Tanjiro is exhausted, poisoned, and barely hanging on, and he hasn't been pushed far enough to awaken sun breathing. It's much the same on the Mugen train, as Tanjiro only really needed sun breathing to generate enough force to cut through Enmu's neck. But this time, even when he has to cut through the body of the train, the moon-breathing 8th form, Moon Dragon Ringtail, provides all the power he needs. So Enmu is still defeated without Tanjiro having to use sun breathing, and we move on to Rengoku's battle against Akaza. Now, obviously, Tanjiro isn't making a difference here because he still lacks the basic skills to keep up with Akaza, so Rengoku still dies in this timeline. But there's also the question of whether Tanjiro and Rengoku will connect in the same way, because he doesn't even approach the Flame Hashira regarding the Hinokami Kagura in this timeline. Next, we move on to the Entertainment District arc, and this is where things start going wrong. Tanjiro holds his own against Daki initially, as just like with Rui, moon breathing is pretty effective at handling attacks that come from multiple directions. Tanjiro manages to continuously create openings using the moon breathing 5th form, Moon Spirit Calamitous Eddy, and Daki is forced to fight defensively even before Tengen arrives. But problems arise when Gyutaro appears, because without accessing sun breathing, Tanjiro never awakens his Demon Slayer mark. In the original timeline, it was the combination of extreme physical stress and the use of the Hinokami Kagura that pushed Tanjiro past his limits and fully manifested his mark. But Tanjiro can't achieve the same effect with only moon breathing, and the fight becomes a desperate struggle. However, Tengen's musical score technique is still enough to take out Gyutaro with some support from Tanjiro, and Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Nezuko coordinate to behead Daki. But Tengen has to push himself way harder in this timeline, and he doesn't survive long enough for Nezuko to heal him with her blood demon art. So while it's still a win for the Demon Slayers, they don't celebrate this victory like in the original timeline, and we move into the Swordsmith Village arc with far less confidence. Now this is where Timeline 1 ends in catastrophe. Tanjiro arrives at the Swordsmith Village with Nezuko, meets the swordsmiths, and discovers the ancient Yorichi Type 0 doll. And even though Tanjiro still trains hard and recovers the legendary sword, without awakening his mark, he's not the catalyst that he originally was. If a sun-breathing user doesn't awaken the Demon Slayer mark, no one else in that generation can either, meaning that Muichiro and Mitsuri don't reach the mark state or get bright red Nichirin blades. When Gyoko and Hantengu attack, the situation spirals out of control. In his original fight against the Upper Moon 5, Giyu got trapped in Gyoko's blood demon art and had to awaken his Demon Slayer mark to break out of it. But without that, Giyu simply drowns, allowing Gyoko to return to wreak havoc on the Swordsmith Village. It's a similar situation in the battle against Hantengu, because Mitsuri needed her Demon Slayer mark to fend off Zohakuten, while Tanjiro hunted down the main body. But in this timeline, Mitsuri gets killed by Zohakuten halfway through their battle, and he joins the effort to protect the main body alongside Urami. This means that Tanjiro is unable to defeat Hantengu, and the entire swordsmith village is destroyed. Without the mark's awakening, and without Nezuko conquering the sun, the core never gains the momentum they needed. This means that Muzan's demons continue their reign of terror, and we don't even see the showdown in the Infinity Castle take place. This is the darkest timeline, where moon breathing alone, no matter how beautifully executed, cannot replace the legendary power of sun breathing. And that brings us to our second alternate timeline, where Tanjiro does figure out how to channel the power of the Hinokami Kagura, but doesn't fully commit to sun breathing. The key difference here is that Tanjiro can still awaken the Demon Slayer mark, but he doesn't necessarily need to use the sun-breathing forms in battle. Everything proceeds similarly to the first timeline up until the Entertainment District arc. Tanjiro has become proficient in moon breathing, using it as his primary style, and he's already defeated Enmu on the Mugen train. The desperate battle against Daki and Gyutaro proceeds just like it did in our first timeline, but when Tanjiro is knocked down and buried in the rubble, something changes. Tengen is poisoned and down. His friends are dying. Yutaro's blood sickles are impossible to break through. He's pushed into a corner with no options left. And in that moment of absolute desperation, Tanjiro's body remembers something deep and primal. His father's dance. The Hinokami Kagura with its flame-like movements that seemed so graceful but held such power. Without fully understanding why, Tanjiro abandons moon-breathing mid-fight and dashes toward Gyutaro using the sun-breathing that was passed down for generations of the Kamado lineage. The shift is explosive, with his strikes resembling solar flares instead of moon-breathing's wild crescents. Tanjiro's forehead scar transforms into the Demon Slayer mark as his heart rate exceeds 200 beats per minute and his body temperature soars past 39 degrees Celsius. With this newfound power, Tanjiro provides just enough support for Tengen to survive the battle, and the Demon Slayers coordinate the simultaneous beheading of both Daki and Gyutaro. But even though the Hinokami Kagura gives Tanjiro an edge here, he doesn't abandon moon breathing. Instead, he views the Hinokami Kagura as a secret weapon that he can tap into when his back is against the wall. Now the entire Swordsmith Village arc changes because Tanjiro has already awakened his mark, which allows the resonance effect to occur. Muichiro achieves the mark state while fighting against Gyoko, and manages to break out of the Upper Moon 5's Blood Demon art and behead him with one clean stroke. Mitsuri also experiences the resonance while battling Zohakuten, and with her amplified strength, she can contend with the summoned dragons. But here is the real question. Can Tanjiro behead Hantengu without sun breathing? The real reason Tanjiro had to abandon water breathing was because it didn't inherently suit his body or his approach to swordsmanship. But moon breathing is different. It's the closest breathing style to sun breathing, as it was literally developed by Yorichi's twin brother. But additionally, moon breathing has 16 forms, the highest among all breathing styles, making it suitable for a wide range of scenarios. So when Tanjiro finally tracks down Hantengu's main body, he uses the moon breathing 7th form, Mirror of Misfortune, Moonlit, to deliver a powerful blow that decapitates the Upper Moon 4. So in this timeline, Nezuko conquers the sun, the Swordsmith Village survives, and the Hashira training arc proceeds with the Demon Slayers alive and marked. Originally, Tanjiro used the Hashira training arc to perfect sun breathing, alongside focusing on the other aspects of swordsmanship. However, if he's using pure moon breathing, Tanjiro can actually just focus on other details like the mark state, or improving his overall strength and conditioning. In fact, it's pretty likely that the version of Tanjiro we see in the Infinity Castle is actually stronger in this timeline, as he didn't need to waste time developing a completely new breathing style. As we enter the final arc, Muzan attacks the Demon Slayers just like he did in the original timeline, and both Ubuyashiki Kagaya and Tamayo sacrifice themselves to damage the Demon King. When Nakime summons all the Demon Slayers to the Infinity Castle, everyone storms the rooms within it, with the Demon Slayers reaching their respective matchups. Tanjiro gets his chance to avenge Rengoku by facing off against Akaza, and this time there's actually an interesting tactical advantage of using moon breathing. We know that Akaza specifically has challenged Kokushibo to a blood battle in the past, and the result was a clear loss. The only reason Akaza survived was because Kokushibo admired his fighting spirit, and this means Akaza holds moon breathing in high regard as the technique that defeated him. Additionally, moon breathing helps Tanjiro adapt to the chaotic, shifting architecture of the castle, while he can occasionally tap into the Hinokami Kagura to access the raw power needed to damage upper ranks. Against Akaza, Tanjiro primarily uses moon breathing to match the demon's martial arts with unpredictable blade work, creating openings for Gyu to attack. Unlike other battles, the key to defeating Akaza wasn't sun breathing, but rather the selfless state, which allowed Tanjiro to bypass the Upper Moon 3's blood demon art. So in this timeline, Tanjiro still accesses the selfless state and transparent world, becoming invisible to the compass needle, while simultaneously seeing Akaza's weaknesses. He doesn't need sun breathing to take out Akaza, as both Gyu and Tanjiro turn their Nichirin blades bright red to behead the Upper Moon 3. The other upper ranks fall as well, and the battle against Kokushibo is especially interesting, as Muichiro is also a moon-breathing user in this timeline. Noting that Muichiro is his descendant was enough to make Kokushibo hold off for a moment, but seeing Muichiro use moon-breathing would make Kokushibo even more curious. He'd want to see how his breathing style had evolved over the years within the Demon Slayer core, and would test Muichiro at first instead of going for the kill. This means that there's more time for Gyomei, Genya, and Sanemi to arrive and provide backup, ensuring that Muichiro isn't lethally injured early in the battle. However, this little development is unlikely to change the outcome of the battle, and with the combined efforts of Gyomei, Sanemi, Muichiro, and Genya, Kokushibo falls. Muichiro and Genya also end up being casualties of this battle, which means that at the end, Tanjiro stands alone as the last surviving moon-breathing user. With that, we move on to the Sunrise Countdown, where the Demon Slayers take on Muzan, and this is where we see the fatal flaw of our second timeline. Kibutsuji Muzan has been alive for nearly 1,000 years, and he's been dealing with Demon Slayers using breathing styles since the Sengoku era. With his 7 hearts and 5 brains that constantly shift position within his body, Muzan has already adapted to every threat except one, the complete, unrelenting assault of sun-breathing. The specific weapon here is Sun-Breathing's 13th form, which Yoriichi developed all those years ago when he fought Muzan in the bamboo forest. The 13th form isn't just another technique, it's the continuous, perfect execution of all 12 forms in succession, increasing its speed and accuracy with each repetition. It was specifically designed by Yoriichi Tsugikuni to track and destroy Muzan's moving organs, with such precision that the Demon King cannot regenerate fast enough to keep up. All this time, Tanjiro has primarily trained moon-breathing, with sun-breathing as a supplement. He might be able to access the sun-breathing forms by tapping into his ancestral memories, but he doesn't have the muscle memory to perform them perfectly. After realizing that his moon-breathing isn't strong enough, Tanjiro attempts to use Hinokami Kagura, but his technique falters. Muzan, who has feared sun-breathing since his encounter with Yoriichi, recognizes this weakness immediately, and the battle is all but over. He sees that Tanjiro is not a reincarnation of Yoriichi, and regains his confidence to fight against the Demon Slayers. The Hashira fight valiantly. Tamayo's poison weakens Muzan, and they manage to stall until dawn approaches, but the crucial difference is in those final moments. In the original timeline, Tanjiro managed to push Muzan to the point where he had to transform in order to escape the sun. Muzan probably still goes for that grotesque, massive infant transformation, but the problem is that the Demon Slayers lack the power to hurt him in this form. The Demon Slayer Corps is forced to throw bodies at the problem, and more Hashira fall, including the likes of Gyomei, Obanai, and Mitsuri. The lower-ranked Demon Slayers sacrifice their lives to keep Muzan from fleeing into the shadows, but as the sun eventually rises, Muzan manages to escape underground. Tanjiro ends up surviving and remains relatively uninjured so he can face off against Muzan later. However, with only Giyu and Sanemi alive among the Hashira, the Demon Slayers have been seriously set back, and Tanjiro can't help but have regrets. What if he had fully mastered sun-breathing instead of splitting his focus? How many of his friends would still be alive? And this brings us to the third timeline, where Tanjiro makes the most strategic choice, starting with moon-breathing and then fully transitioning to sun-breathing. Everything proceeds as in Timeline 2 through the Entertainment District arc. Tanjiro trains in moon-breathing, becomes proficient, and then awakens his Demon Slayer mark, using sun-breathing against Gyutaro and Daki. Before heading into the Swordsmith village to receive a new sword, Tanjiro first visits Shinjiro Rengoku, the former Flame Hashira, to see what he knows about the dance of the Fire God. Shinjiro is quick to make it clear that this has nothing to do with flame breathing, but suggests that it might be connected to sun breathing, the original breathing style. Naturally, this discovery catches the attention of the Hashira, as sun breathing is the only technique to ever hurt the Demon King. Tanjiro heads to the Swordsmith village, hoping to begin an intensive period of training, but before he can get too far, Gyoko and Hantengu attack. Now once again, the battle proceeds similarly to how it did in our second timeline, with Tanjiro primarily using moon breathing and opting for the Hinokami Kagura when he needs a boost. But the Hashira training arc changes completely, because now his main priority is unlocking the 13 forms of sun breathing. Tanjiro even goes so far as to neglect his usual moon-breathing training, and meditates with Gyomei, hoping to awaken the memories of his father's dance. But Giyu realizes that Tanjiro is getting ahead of himself with his new technique, and forces him to train with Muichiro to ensure that he still has the fundamentals of moon-breathing nailed down. Because moon-breathing is so closely related to sun-breathing, switching between the two styles isn't as damaging as alternating between water-breathing and sun-breathing, and Tanjiro can actually do it in battle. When training with Muichiro in speed exercises, Tanjiro realizes he can suddenly shift from sun-breathing's direct assault patterns to moon-breathing's unpredictable crescents to catch his opponent off guard. When the Infinity Castle arc begins, Tanjiro has become something unprecedented, a moon-breathing master with sun-breathing in his toolkit. The battle against Akaza happens just like it did in our previous timeline, but the real challenge is the final battle against Muzan. By this point, Tanjiro has fully entered the selfless state, and he can see into the transparent world, but he knows that he should hide his aces from the Demon King at first, and charges forward with moon-breathing 16th form, Moonbow Half Moon. Muzan isn't impressed and counters the Demon Slayers charging at him, but he recognizes that Tamayo's poison is actually doing serious damage. It's only after Gyomei's Kusarigama crashes through Muzan's defenses that Tanjiro realizes the opportunity, and perfectly executes the sun-breathing 13th form. This technique was developed specifically for cutting through Muzan's vital organs simultaneously, and even though he lacks Yorichi's speed and power, Tanjiro lands a clean hit. The Demon King begins regenerating, but his scars are wide open, letting Gyomei, Gyu, Sanemi, and Obanai strike. When dawn approaches and Muzan tries his final transformation, Tanjiro is ready. He uses Moon Breathing's most powerful offensive technique, the 14th form, Catastrophe, 10-man Crescent Moon, to blast apart Muzan's defensive shell. As the sun rises, Muzan begins to burn, and this time, there's no last-minute desperation move where he transforms Tanjiro into a demon. You see, in the original timeline, Tanjiro used pure sun breathing against Muzan, leading the Demon King to believe that Tanjiro would resist the sun if he became the new Demon King. But in our battle, Muzan was fighting under the impression that Tanjiro was a moon-breathing user for most of their encounter, and it's highly unlikely that he would develop this plan on the fly. But on top of that, Tanjiro with moon breathing dealt far more damage to the Demon King than he did in the original Demon Slayer story, meaning that Muzan probably doesn't even have the strength left to transform him into a demon. This means that Nezuko and Kanao don't need to get involved to fight off a Demon King Tanjiro, and the surviving Hashira can deliver the final blow against Muzan. As the Demon King turns to ashes and fades away, Tanjiro walks toward a new dawn. Humanity has been saved from demons, not just with Yorichi's legendary technique, but by integrating moon breathing into it and honoring the legacy of the Tsugikuni brothers. So what do you think of this timeline? Is moon breathing a solid replacement for water breathing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.